Hello, seeker of legends. Welcome to Drowsy Myths, your traveling storyteller through the tangled halls of ancient lore. Today, we are exposing the most scandalous love affairs of Zeus, king of Olympus, to see how a single flash of desire toppled bronze towers, launched fleets toward Troy, and even stitched new constellations into the night sky. We will meet 8 of his most famous lovers, trace the children they bore, and follow the storm cloud consequences that echoed across Greece for centuries. So draw close. Keep one wary eye on the thunderheads overhead. And let us begin where fate first slipped through a polished wall of metal. We begin our exploration of Zeus's tangled love affairs by traveling to Argos, a rugged city of bronze shields and barley fields, where the king's terror of prophecy locked his only daughter in a glistening metal tower, and where Zeus chose to intervene in a form as unexpected as it was unforgettable. Argos stands on the northeastern corner of the Peloponnese, south of Corinth and east of the mountain spine that divides Greece. In mythic memory, it is older than Mycenae, proud of its river god ancestry, and governed in the age of our tale by King Acrisius. Acrisius valued lineage and order, the very pillars that kept a monarch's throne from cracking. Yet he lacked one crucial cornerstone, a male heir. Hoping to coax destiny into cooperation, he carried offerings to Delphi, the sanctuary perched on Parnassian slopes, where the Pythia's breath united mortal questions with divine riddles. Instead of comfort, he received ice. The oracle murmured that a grandson not yet born would one day cause his death. Greek kings heard such warnings like drumbeats. Trying to escape often proved the surest path to fulfillment, but fear is stubborn in the heart of power. Returning to Argos, Acrisius ordered a prison unlike any in mainland Greece. From Cyprus came ingots of copper, and from the Caucasus came tin. Argive smiths blended them into sheets of shimmering bronze. The tower walls, inside and out, were plated smooth enough to reflect a candle flame unbroken. Sunlight that struck those walls bounced inward, turning the cell into a kiln by noon and a dim ember box by night. Within that polished cylinder, he locked Danaë, his daughter, whose future womb he now regarded as a threat more than a promise. He supplied a cedar couch, a jug of water, and a single myrtle cutting in a clay pot. Myrtle belonged to Aphrodite and to quiet endurance. Perhaps Acrisius believed divine plants might keep his daughter docile. But Greek listeners understood the irony. A symbol of love was planted in soil of fear. Danaë, whose name echoes the Greek word for parched, began to measure time by the angle of a sunlight square on bronze. She watered her myrtle, traced old hymns onto the warm metal with her fingertip, and tried to ignore the echo of her own breathing, bouncing endlessly between the plates. Servants brought food up a narrow stair, only when night fell to hide their shame. They spoke little. Even the clank of their sandals betrayed awe for the king's audacity in chaining destiny. Olympus, a day's march north of Argos if one could walk the heavens, hummed with its own intrigues. Zeus, cloud-gatherer and highest among immortals, looked earthward at intervals, tracking omens like a shepherd counts stars. He noticed the bronze tower because twilight reflections flared brighter than campfires visible from the sky. His interest sharpened when he sensed Danaë's patient heartbeat inside that echo chamber. Hera, Zeus's queen and guardian of marriage vows, was occupied adjudicating a quarrel among 2 Boeotian river nymphs over fishing rights, giving Zeus a rare unmonitored hour. Direct entrances abounded in other romancer swans, sweeping down on still water. Eagles soaring to lonely peaks, but bronze plates left no aperture large enough for a god in solid form. Zeus chose innovation over brute force. He dissolved himself into warm, gold-tinted rain. In Greek art, gold connotes beauty, power, and wealth, and rain speaks of fertility. By choosing both, he wrapped seduction in an alchemical symbol. Twilight dulled Argive rooftops to copper. A single beam threaded the lattice of Danaë's ceiling. Within that beam, droplets formed, each glowing from within like a bee, amber frozen yet alive. They drifted in slow spiral, painting glints across bronze until the chamber shone like dawn poured into a goblet. Danaë stepped beneath the light. Warmth slid over her shoulders, sank into her skin. The story says, divine gold does not burn, it imbues. Eyelids fluttered as quiet wonder displaced fear. When droplets sank into cedar boards, they left no scorch marks, only soft scent of laurel and thunder-washed air. Then silence returned, heavier, yet strangely comforting. Months ripened the myrtle and swelled Danaë's belly. Rumor of an infant cry reached Perseus like a dagger tip. Ascending his spiral stair, torches trembling in fists, he found Danaë, cradling a newborn with hair bright as sunrise and eyes clear as river water. She named him Perseus, which scholars connect to a verb meaning to blaze or pierce. Perseus saw only a ticking prophecy. Greek blood taboos forbade killing kin outright, and exposure carried less ritual pollution. He ordered carpenters to fashion a chest of cedar bands, reinforced with iron hoops, and sent soldiers to heave it off a coastal cliff. Night cloaked the Aegean in inky swells. Danaë whispered lullabies, while salt spray dampened linen wraps. She told Perseus about winds that shift courses, and about Poseidon who guards sailors if one prays politely. Scholars note that in Greek religion, the sea is unpredictably kinder than kings because it answers to gods, and gods sometimes cherish the innocent. Indeed, Zeus guided a steady Meltemi breeze toward the chest, pushing it southeast through Cycladic channels. Seriphos, a rocky island, roughly 12 kilometers long, saw dawn shimmer over its coves when a fisherman named Dictys hauled nets from gentle surf. His name translates to net. Etymology here turns plot device. He pried the chest lid, finding mother and child exhausted, yet alive. Dictys carried them to a cottage under a tamarisk tree. There, Danaë tasted open air with no bronze echo, and Perseus laughed at gulls swooping overhead. On Olympus, Hera finally heard rumor of golden rain in Argos. Thunderheads gathered on her brow. Zeus responded with bland assurances. If a mortal lived, why worry? Hera's narrowed eyes promised future reckonings. Seriphos respected guest friendship. Xenia, though its king Polydectes, Dictys' brother, eyed Danaë's beauty and Perseus's strange aura with ambitions of his own. He welcomed them, but began plotting paths to claim both mother and hero for personal advantage. Those machinations will unfold 2 chapters ahead. For now, mother and child found peace on the fringe of Greek maps. Danaë replanted her myrtle by a village well whose water tasted of limestone and salt. Each evening, islanders gathered to hear her sing hymns she had once whispered alone on bronze walls. Perseus toddled along pebble beaches, collecting shells shaped like tiny shields, unaware he would one day hold a mirrored shield against the gaze of a Gorgon. This love affair between Zeus and Danaë demonstrates the Greek struggle between fate and free will, revealing how even mighty kings cannot barricade destiny behind bronze. And it launches a chain of events that will ripple outward, shaping the founding of Mycenae, the rescue of Andromeda, and the weaving of constellations above our heads. Across the sea beneath the bright Tyrian sun, Europa laughed while gathering wildflowers, unaware that a snow-white bull already wandered toward the shore, gentle eyes hiding a thunderstorm of stolen desire. And so our journey turns from bronze towers to a bull on a Phoenician beach. We cross the Aegean and follow the Levantine coast to Tyre, the wealthy Phoenician port where purple dye stained sailors' hands and trade ships stitched the eastern Mediterranean together. Here, Zeus traded sunlight for ivory hide and gentle eyes, preparing one of his most daring disguises. Our task is to see why a king of gods would slip into the skin of a bull, how a laughing princess named Europa became the axis of a new dynasty, and how this seaside encounter shaped both Crete and the very name of a continent. Tyre rose from twin islands linked by narrow causeways. Cedar beams from Lebanon ridges framed its temples, and bronze anchors lined its crowded quays. To Greek listeners, Tyre felt both distant and alluring, the threshold between Aegean familiarity and Eastern marvels. Europa, daughter of King Agenor, walked the strand beyond the city walls on a spring morning. Her name meant broad eyes or wide face. Later poets heard in it a foreshadow of Europe itself, though the continent would claim her name long after. She carried a wicker basket, gathering wild crocus and bright crimson lilies for altars dedicated to Astarte, the local goddess of love. Zeus observed from Olympus. Tales describe him restless whenever Hera's attention drifted. And that day, Hera attended a council in far northern Hyperborea, judging a dispute over migratory swans. Free from scrutiny, Zeus watched Europa laugh with companions by the tide pools where tiny crabs scuttled. Unlike Danaë, whose patience in bronze walls stirred empathy, Europa's lively curiosity stirred delight. Yet a direct approach risked panic and witness. Ancient storytellers say Zeus admired her gentle trust. He resolved to gain it by becoming the one creature revered in both Crete and Phoenicia, the sacred bull. On the plains of Crete, bulls symbolized renewal each spring when they plowed the first furrows. Minoan frescoes already showed youths leaping across bullbacks in daring rites. By choosing a snow-white bull, Zeus wove two cultures together. He descended to a meadow near the surf, shaping muscles under glossy hide, curling horns, smooth as carved ivory, and softening eyes to pools of calm blue. Then he ambled onto the sand, where Europa and her maidens wove flower garlands. Maidens paused, startled, but the bull's serenity eased nerves. Europa stepped closer, intrigued by horn tips that glowed faint gold where sun touched them. She knelt and laid a garland across the brow. When the bull knelt in return, folding front legs with fluid grace, admiration turned to affection. Europa stroked the velvet muzzle and felt no fear. For Greek and Phoenician alike saw tame bulls as living altars. She called to friends to fetch more blossoms. Zeus breathed slow, letting trust deepen. At Europa's urging, the bull lowered further, inviting her to climb upon his broad back. She laughed, a clear note that joined morning gull cries, and settled near the shoulders, gripping garland like reins. Maidens clapped. The bull rose and stepped into gentle surf. Foam lapped ivory knees. Europa expected a brief wade, but water deepened. Maidens shouted warning, yet excitement twined with nerves inside her chest. The bull moved with unhurried power, each stroke parting turquoise shallows. Soon shouts faded behind rolling surf. Zeus increased speed once distance hid shore. Salt spray cooled Europa's cheeks. She pressed closer to the massive neck and whispered plea for safety. The bull spoke no words, yet a warm calm radiated through its hide, steadying her breath. Greek audiences accepted that gods can project reassurance without speech, a charm of presence. Winged Eros, unseen, is said to have guided dolphins alongside their ark, soothing Europa with playful company. The crossing stretched for a day and part of a star-filled night. Above them, constellations wheeled, and Europa saw a crescent moon paint silver paths across wave crests. She began to suspect divine agency, for mortal bulls drown quickly at sea. Instead, this one swam tireless, leaving a luminous wake. Legend claims Poseidon stilled storms out of respect for Zeus's new maneuver. When dawn rose, the limestone cliffs of Crete glowed pink ahead. They landed on a beach near Gorton Grove. The bull leapt ashore, and at last transformed. Europa staggered back as hide folded into flowing robes and horns, dissolved into curling dark hair. Before her stood Zeus, taller than cedar poles, a faint halo of thundercloud light framing shoulders. He thanked her for trust and promised royal honors. In mythic pattern, Europa's awe subdued fear. She recognized not just power, but gentleness in the guide who had carried her across leagues of open water. Zeus led her to a cypress-shaded meadow, where saffron crocus bloomed among wild thyme. There, 3 gifts sealed their union. Talos, the bronze guardian, who later patrolled Cretan shores, a spear that never missed, and Lelaps, the hound who always caught its quarry. Europa accepted them, bridging divine favor and mortal rule. Zeus departed, knowing Hera's absence would not last. Europa became queen of Crete and bore 3 sons, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. Minos inherited both Cretan throne and the labyrinthine political skill that made his name a byword for judgment. Rhadamanthus carried law westward, later serving as judge of the dead. Sarpedon fought beneath Trojan walls, proof that one shoreline abduction could sway war centuries later. Archaeologists link the spread of Near Eastern motifs in early palace frescoes to this mythical union, reflecting historical trade between Crete and Phoenicia. Agenor, bereft, sent Europa's brothers to search. One, Cadmus, followed a cow to Boeotia and founded Thebes, showing how Zeus's liaisons ripple across maps. Even the name Europe traces back to this ride, though linguists debate its exact path. Zeus watched Europa stroll palace corridors, lined with dolphin murals, perhaps feeling satisfaction tempered by awareness of coming storms. Hera soon learned of the bull disguise and redirected her anger toward later lovers, but Europa herself remained revered, perhaps because Crete honored bulls long before Zeus borrowed the symbol. This encounter charts how divine desire can transplant a princess across seas, birth judges, and kings, and etch an entire landmass with her name. Here, Greek myth intersects with maritime trade routes, illustrating cultural fusion wrapped inside one shimmering story. While Europa settled among Cretan cypresses, far to the west in Sparta, a queen named Leda wandered along the Eurota's riverbank, unaware that a swan with thunder hidden beneath its white feathers drifted nearer, and so our tale glides from bull to bird, from Tyrian surf to Spartan willow shade. We journey next to the fertile valley of Laconia in southern Greece, where the Eurota's river threads between reeds and willow banks. Sparta, known today for its later warrior discipline, was in Homeric times a kingdom of horse pastures, terraced orchards, and bright-tiled porticos. Here, Queen Leda, wife of King Tyndareus, tended seasonal rites for Artemis and watched over a court that prized elegance as much as spearcraft. Zeus, ever restless, turned his gaze toward Sparta when he heard poets praise Leda's dignity and calm grace, qualities admired across the Aegean. This is the scandal of the swan, a tale whose consequences will ripple all the way to the gates of Troy. Early summer fog drifted from the Eurotas at dawn, silvering poplar trunks and hanging in tattered scarves among reeds. Leda rose before sunrise to lead her maidens in a small procession, carrying wreaths of ivy and white narcissus to the riverside shrine of Artemis Orthia. Orthia, meaning upright or strong, watched over young women of Sparta, guiding them toward healthy motherhood and balanced courage. Leda's presence at these rites underlined her role as the steady heart of Tyndareus's realm. Zeus watched from cloud shadow above Taygetus Ridge. Leda's poise reminded him of Hera's early kindness before jealousy scarred their household, and desire mingled with nostalgia. Greek storytellers explain that Zeus sought Leda's favor, partly to defy Nemesis, goddess of retribution, who had once mocked even gods for yielding to beauty. The god of storms resolved to approach quietly, not as thunder, but as a creature whose symbol already filled Greek art with hints of purity, the swan. Beside Lake Stymphalus, Zeus found a wild swan, observing its gliding posture and ivory plumage. He shaped his immortal substance into that form, stretching necklines and tucking wings beneath new feathers. He altered the bird's voice to a soothing hush, nothing like the shrill trumpet swan's call when startled, and he folded thunder deep beneath down, so no mortal ear would suspect storm. Mid-morning sunlight pierced fog as Leda's maidens dispersed to collect fresh water from the Eurotas. Leda lingered alone on a grassy bank, lace of willow shade mottling her cloak. A sudden rush of wing beats stirred the air. The white swan landed on the river, its passage sending ripples across mirrored sky reflections. It paddled closer, arching neck as if bowing in respect. Leda, versed in augury, read good omen in the swan's gentle approach. She knelt and extended an open palm. The swan drifted nearer until beak brushed her fingertips with cool softness. Trust bloomed instantly, perhaps aided by divine aura that soothed mortal nerves. A cry echoed from upriver, rough and loud, imitating the rasp of a hunting eagle. The swan shuddered, wings flaring, and scrambled onto the bank. Greek commentators later said Zeus called that eagle cry himself, staging danger to prompt Leda's protective impulse. Whether staged or real, Leda gathered the trembling bird against her cloak and retreated beneath willow branches. She whispered calm words, rubbing its neck. Moments stretched. Pulsing warmth spread from feathers against her chest, traveling deeper than ordinary comfort. In that hush, Zeus allowed divine essence to mingle with mortal heart, and the union occurred in silence, witnessed only by reeds shivering in faint wind. By the time maidens returned, the swan paddled midstream once more, wings tucked neatly, eyes bright with placid innocence. Leda said she had sheltered the creature from an eagle, an act praised by her attendants. They wove remaining narcissus into a wreath and draped it over the willow as thanks to Artemis for protecting gentle creatures. The swan cooed softly before lifting skyward, white against clear blue, and vanished beyond cypress crowns. Weeks passed, and subtle heaviness settled within Leda's body. She confided to Tyndareus that prophetic dreams filled her sleep, visions of flaming ships upon distant beaches. The king summoned seers who declared the dreams auspicious, but offered little clarity. Leda carried her secret in quiet dignity until the night silver moon shone brightest. Stories say that same night, Tyndareus shared her bed, meaning that when she later laid 2 smooth eggs in a lidded chest of wool, lineage inside them blended mortal and divine. Greek myth comfortably houses eggs in royal bedchambers. Their appearance signals cosmic intervention beyond midwife comprehension. Servants discovered the eggs at dawn. One cracked to reveal Helen, a child whose first cry seemed to brighten chamber walls. The second split into twins, Castor and Pollux. Some traditions add a fourth, Clytemnestra, sharing space within twin-shelled mystery. Scholars interpret the twin birth to underscore duality of mortality and immortality. Pollux glowed with divine spark, while Castor remained fully mortal, a contrast that would later define their fate among the stars, as Gemini. Helen's beauty unfolded like dawn across calm sea, so striking that distant kings would one day anchor fleets beneath Troy's ramparts to claim her. Castor mastered horses and chariots before adolescence. Pollux swung boxing gloves of rawhide against Spartan youths, and Clytemnestra learned statecraft with a steady eye. Each gift bore seeds of future war and alliance, linking Lacedaemon to Mycenae and beyond. Zeus watched their growth with satisfaction tempered by inevitability. Hera soon noticed star-like gleam in Pollux's eyes, a reminder of swan feathers she never saw but could imagine all too well. Her anger redirected at future targets, stirring trials that Castor and Pollux would face, but she let Sparta flourish for a time, perhaps respecting Leda's kindness. Tyndareus forbade mortal suitors to steal Helen's favor prematurely, yet desire grew among princes of Achaea. Odysseus crafted an oath that bound those princes to defend whichever husband Helen chose, a clever hedge that would drag them all to war. Thus one quiet moment beneath willow branches sowed the long campaign songs of Homer. Leda visited Riverbank each spring thereafter, laying wreaths where she first met the swan. She never again saw ivory feathers glide along the Eurotas, but reeds often rustled as though a hidden bird stirred at her approach. Whether comfort or irony, the rustle reminded her that love can slip through willow shade, wearing any mask, weaving destinies no mortal mind foresees. This liaison layers tender deception over booming impact. It introduces seeds of the Trojan War, elevates Castor and Pollux to stardom in both sky and myth, and shows how Zeus's desires often hijack mortal politics, pushing kingdoms toward alliances and bloodshed. Southwest of Sparta, on the plain of Argos, a priestess named Io tended Hera's altar, unaware that soon she would feel the sting of a jealous goddess and wander the world beneath the hide of a trembling white heifer. Our story now turns from swan feathers to river mist and sleepless eyes. We turn our attention back to Argos, where the Inachus River cuts across reed-fringed banks and low stone bridges. Here, a priestess named Io served Hera with unwavering devotion and irony that will become painfully clear. Zeus's pursuit of Io and Hera's swift, inventive retaliation will carry us from Peloponnesian fields to Balkan highlands, across Thracian forests, and finally to the silt-rich delta of the Nile. In tracing Io's wanderings, we see how divine jealousy can redraw ancient geography and establish bloodlines that stretch all the way to Heracles. Argos, in the generation after Danaë's exile, had regained its usual rhythm of marketplace chatter and bronze foundries clanging. The city's patronage of Hera was strong. Her primary temple, the Heraion, stood 4 kilometers northeast of town on a gentle rise where sheep grazed among wild thyme. Pilgrims from all over Greece journeyed there to leave ivory figurines or terracotta doves. Io, daughter of Inachus, river god turned legendary king, served as key priestessan Hera, lighting sacrificial fires and interpreting omens in the curling smoke. Her lineage alone made her a symbol of continuity. Argives believed their river provided first life to the plain, and Io bore that ancient authority on her shoulders. Zeus's interest in Io can be read 2 ways. Mythographers, like Apollodorus, frame it as sudden desire sparked by her beauty, but modern interpreters note a political undertone. Possessing a priestess of Hera in Hera's own stronghold is bold, borderline provocative, and hints at Zeus's penchant for pushing boundaries even within his marriage. On the day our story begins, Hera was temporarily absent, attending childbirth rites on Mount Cithaeron, leaving her temple briefly outside her vigilant gaze. Zeus descended toward Argos, hidden inside a dense bank of silvery mist, a practical cloak in a region where early morning river vapors drift regularly across fields. Io was alone near the altar court, trimming burnt bones after a dawn sacrifice of dove and barley. She noticed the mist roll in thicker than usual, pearly tendrils winding around marble columns. A hush fell, muting cicada cheer. Zeus's presence radiated from the fog like low-heat ancient texts, described divinity announcing itself through an overwhelming stillness rather than dramatic thunder. Io stepped back, unsure whether she witnessed a sign from Hera or something stranger. Zeus moved closer, no visible form, only a warm eddy of vapor. Greek audiences accepted that gods could communicate emotions directly. Io felt an enveloping sense of fascination and unease. Meanwhile, Hera, returning sooner than Zeus anticipated, saw stormy wisps of cloud paused conspicuously over her sanctuary. Suspicion flared. Her storied jealousy is not trivial anger, but an extension of her domain over marriage and rightful order. She descended on a chariot drawn by peacocks, whose tail eyes glittered. Zeus sensed her approach and acted instantly, turning Io into a snow-white heifer. The transformation served two purposes: escape identification and evoke Argive agricultural symbolism. White cattle were prized offerings. Disguising Io as such placed her within Hera's ritual portfolio, making direct violence difficult. Hera arrived to find Zeus beside the heifer, feigning casual admiration. She asked where the lovely animal came from, voice as smooth as polished horn. Zeus claimed he had discovered it grazing near the Inachus and wished to present it as a gift to his wife. Hera accepted with a smile that did not reach her golden eyes. She tethered the heifer to an olive tree and summoned Argus Panoptes to guard her. Argus's epithet Panoptes means all-seeing. Artists depict him with 100 eyes across his body. Each eye slept only in shifts, so some always stayed open. Hera's logic was precise. If Zeus approached Io, Argus would notice. Argus led the heifer to broad meadows watered by spring runoff. Iamond intact, but voice reduced to lowing, wandered under vigilant gaze of eyes that never fully blinked. Scholars interpret Io's condition as a mythic exploration of dehumanization under external control. She could observe, but not speak. She retained intellect, yet lacked agency. Zeus needed subtlety. He chose Hermes, trickster and guide of travelers, to free Io. Hermes disguised himself as a shepherd, leaning against a stone wall within Argus's earshot, playing idle tunes on a reed pipe. The melody meandered lazy as summer breeze. Argus, curious, invited conversation. Hermes told winding stories, each punctuated by softer and softer notes. Ancient texts compare it to hypnotic droning of bees. Gradually, Argus's eyes fell closed in overlapping waves of drowsiness. The moment the last eyelid drooped, Hermes produced a curved adze and struck. Argus's 100 eyes dimmed. Hermes set them later into Hera's peacock tail, explaining the bird's shimmering ocelli. Io stood free, but still heifer-shaped. Hera, discovering Argus slain, unleashed a gadfly, large as a war javelin head. Greek gadflies were dreaded by cattle herders. Hera's insect was divine, its sting hotter than iron fresh from forge. It drove Io into frantic flight. Here, mythology becomes geography lesson. Io charged north, crossing the Gulf of Corinth at its narrowest point. Mythic writers later label the strait Bosporos cows, crossing echoing Io's passage. She dashed through Boeotia, where locals named Lake Haliartos cattle pasture in her honor, and continued into Thrace, following mountainous paths that mark trade routes between Aegean and Danubian tribes. Ancient travelogues mention a cow's footprint carved in stone near Dodona, hinting the story served to connect disparate Greek sanctuaries through narrative waypoints. Io's journey bridged culturally diverse landscapes, weaving them into a single mythic map. Exhausted, Io reached the Ionian coast. The sea later took its name from her, but the gadfly's sting allowed no rest. She swam across to Illyria, climbed Dinaric slopes, and pushed south again into Thessaly. Finally, she crossed the Hellespont, mythic Bosporus's later sibling strait, into Asia Minor, traceable along what would be Persian royal road centuries later. On and on, each region absorbing the tale, etymologizing local rivers as cow in their own dialects. Io descended barren Anatolian plateaus to the Black Sea mouth of the Halys River, where she collapsed. Even gods grew weary of the chase. Hera called off the gadfly, perhaps because Io's torment had satisfied vengeance, or because Zeus swore new oaths of restraint. Zeus restored Io's human form near the delta of the Nile, symbolically far from Hera's sphere of influence. Egyptians integrated her into local law as Hathor-like figure, and said she married Telegonus, king of the Nile. She bore Epaphus, whose name mirrors the touch that freed her from cowhide. Epaphus later founded Memphis and fathered Libya, thereby connecting Greek heroic lines to African geography. By weaving Io into Nile history, Greeks explained cultural links between Egypt and Greecekin to Europa, linking Crete with the Levant, showing myth as early diplomacy through storytelling. Back in Argos, Acrisius heard of Io's transformation and flight. The priesthood declared it an omen of Hera's displeasure. Sacrifices doubled, though Hera's temple still lost its favored servant. Hera, seeing Zeus's liaisons persist, shifted strategy toward punishing offspring instead, setting scene for Heracles' serpents in a cradle. Io's Odyssey reveals how divine jealousy reshapes mortal borders and births dynasties spanning continents. Her path demonstrates that even unwilling participants in divine dramas can become foundational ancestors, heralded by multiple cultures. This affair underscores Greek anxiety about the cost of catching a god's eye, the fragility of agency under power, and the surprising capacity of suffering to seed future empires. While Io wandered under gadfly torment, deep within the Arcadian forest, a huntress named Callisto pledged loyalty to Artemis, unaware that Zeus, once more restless, would soon slip into their sacred grove, sparking a tale written forever among the stars as Ursa Major. Next, we trade river mist for shadowed glades and the silent tread of a bear. We leave the river valleys and temples of Argos behind and move into Arcadia, the rugged heart of the Peloponnese, where oak and pine crowd steep ridges and wild boar root through leaf litter. This inland highland, poorer in coin than coastal Polius, yet richer in myth, sheltered a sisterhood of huntresses sworn to Artemis, goddess of the moon and guardian of wilderness purity. Among them walked Callisto, a nymph of kingly blood and fearless aim, whose fate would vault from forest floor to northern sky once Zeus intruded on vows older than his disguises. Arcadia's mountains run jagged like a raised spine through Greece. Pastures are thin, yet springs bubble cold from limestone and give birth to the Alpheus and Ladon rivers. Shepherds here counted seasons by goat migrations and star positions, not by tyrant edicts, making Arcadia a fitting cradle for Artemis's cult. Artemis, twin of Apollo, prized remote glens where bronze leagues and palace intrigues faded. Her companions were young women who chose bow over spindle, pledging chastity to match the goddess's own. Callisto traced her lineage to King Lycaon, the grim sovereign who once tested Zeus with a meal of forbidden flesh. Though that earlier crime ended in thunderous punishment, Lycaon's daughter Callisto found refuge in Artemis's band, perhaps seeking distance from her father's infamy. She learned to loose arrows so clean they hummed before striking, to imitate the owl's silent glide through branches, and to read claw marks on birch as one reads ink on parchment. Greek audiences respected Arcadian skill because rugged terrain forged resilient spirits. Zeus noticed Callisto during a hunt that swept across the slopes of Mount Manalon. From Olympus, he watched a crescent of maidens pursuing deer through fern-draped ravines. Artemis at their head like pale fire. Callisto ran closest beside the goddess. Hazel eyes bright, braids whipping, stride long enough to match hounds. Zeus admired the seamless unity of hunter and habitat. Desire sparked not just for beauty, but for the challenge of entering a circle guarded by Artemis, whose arrows could strike even a god's pride. Opportunity came after months of quiet observation. One summer afternoon, Callisto wandered apart to draw water from a cold spring ringed by plane trees. The spring flowed from Ledon's upper course, and locals said it belonged to nymphs older than Sparta's founding. Callisto knelt, cupped both hands, and drank. When she raised her head, Artemis appeared, or so she believed. The huntress goddess seldom traveled alone, yet now approached quietly, barefoot on moss, silver belt unstrung. Callisto lowered her bow in respect and waited for instruction. But the figure who smiled carried magnetism warmer than moonlight. In the narratives of later poets, Zeus disguised himself as Artemis to bypass the defenses of both mortal modesty and divine chastity. Callisto sensed familiarity in the gaze, yet felt heaviness spread within her pulse, a sign to Greek listeners of godly influence. The encounter unfolded under whispering leaves, no witnesses except the spring itself. When Callisto finally rose and returned to the band, she told no one, perhaps confused by paradox of devotion and longing now braided in her heart. Months ripened acorns and reddened hawthorn berries. Callisto's body began to change. Within Artemis's company, where tunics were loose and nights spent beneath constellations, pregnancies had no place. During a midday rest, the goddess called her companions to bathe in the Arcadian pool Limna. Maidens unclasped belts and waded into cool water. Callisto hesitated. Artemis, whose gaze tolerates no secret, saw the curve beneath the linen. Shock iced over into wrath. Artemis demanded an oath by river Styx that none of her band had broken chastity. Callisto could not bend truth. The goddess raised a hand and banished her. Grief, mingling with fury for the betrayal, cut both. Exile pushed Callisto into denser woods, where she birthed a son, Arcas, his name echoing the very land Arcadia. Hera, meanwhile, discovered Zeus's latest deception and found perfect target for her anger. She appealed to destiny itself, turning Callisto into a bear, a creature Greeks feared yet respected for fierce protection of cubs. Ursa called to mind brute strength, wrapped in maternal instinct. With a single divine word, Callisto's arms lengthened into paws, nails curved into claws, skin darkened beneath coarse hair, and voice locked behind throaty growl. Her eyes, however, kept the same quiet intelligence. For years, Callisto roamed Mainalon under bear hide, dodging hunters who sought pelts for winter cloaks. She taught Arcas to forage among bee-loud thyme and scale hollow chestnut trees for fat honeycombs. When Arcas reached adolescence, he became prince of nearby Parasia, ignorant of his mother's fate. One autumn afternoon, Arcas tracked a stag to a glade where Callisto foraged. Sharp instincts clashed with hidden blood ties. He notched an arrow and approached. Zeus, watching from cloud verge, realized tragedy poised on release of a bowstring. He swept down in whirlwind gust, seizing both mother and son, and hurled them into the constellations. Their forms fixed among stars as Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, bound forever in rotation around the North Celestial Pole. Ancient navigators used those stars to orient midnight voyages. Thus, a secret forest transgression transformed into nightly guidance for sailors, shepherds, and caravan traders. Hera, still unreconciled, petitioned Oceanus and Tethys that the bears be denied setting beneath horizon, condemning them to restless circling, an asterism that never dips for true rest. Callisto's story underlines several Greek themes. First, vows carry power equal to thunderbolts. Breaking them willingly or not, invites cosmic correction. Second, maternal devotion survives transformation, leading Zeus not simply to rescue, but to immortalize. Third, jealousy of Hera operates with surgical precision, punishing the innocent but directing lessons at faithless Zeus. Finally, Greek cosmology often roots star patterns in moral tales, fusing celestial navigation with ethical reflection. This scandal underscores how divine pursuit may overturn sacred oaths, provoke a goddess, reconfigure natural forms, and eventually carve enduring markers into the sky that still guide human journeys today. While Callisto circled among pines and stars, in Thebes, a princess named Semele kindled a romance with Zeus so intense that she would beg to see his true form, a wish that would cloak her in lightning and bring the twice-born Dionysus into the world. Our path now leads from quiet Arcadian glens to firelit Theban chambers. We leave the shadowy forests of Arcadia and step onto the sun-baked flagstones of Thebes, a city in Boeotia famed for 7 bronze gates, fertile plains, and a royal line forever entangled with tragedy and triumph. Here Princess Semele, daughter of King Cadmus and Queen Harmonia, welcomed Zeus behind closed shutters. What began as hushed midnight visits ended in a fiery revelation that birthed Dionysus, god of wine and ecstatic release, and taught mortals why proximity to raw divinity demands caution. Thebes occupied a strategic crossroad between northern Thessaly and the isthmus leading to Peloponnese. Its founder Cadmus had followed a Delphic cow until it lay to rest on these plains, then fought a dragon to claim the land. The city that rose from that dragon-sowed soil prided itself on wisdom and resilience, yet its royal palace carried undercurrent of restlessness. Semele grew within pillars, faced with imported cedar and courtyards perfumed by myrtle. Her name stems from a Thracian root meaning earth, hinting at fertility threads within her fate. Zeus noticed Semele during a harvest festival honoring Dionysian spirits, long before the god himself existed in full form. Unlike Danaë or Europa, whose stories began with isolation or playful innocence, Semele's tale starts with an invitation. She prayed aloud for a lover as grand as the sky. Greek religion viewed prayers as seeds that gods might choose to water, and Zeus decided to answer in person. Hera, at that moment, toured the Western Isles to inspect new altars, giving Zeus a rare window for clandestine courtship. Night after night, Zeus descended in a cloak of warm breeze, smelling of smoked cedar and distant lightning, appearing as a tall Theban youth with hair like dark bronze. Semele felt no fear, for Theban legends welcomed gods in mortal shape. Courtyard torchlight flickered across mosaic floors as they spoke of constellations and the restless pulse of distant seas. Zeus never revealed name, yet Semele suspected greatness from the hush that followed each word. Over weeks, affection deepened into passion, and Semele conceived a child. Hera soon sensed rival fragrance upon her marble corridors. She vowed not simply to punish Zeus, but to expose his nature in a way that condemned the mortal partner as collateral lesson. Donning the shape of Beroe, Semele's elderly nurse, whose counsel Semele trusted, Hera visited the princess in private. She praised the mysterious suitor's charm, yet planted a seed of doubt with gentle questions. Did this lover truly command lightning? Was he perhaps a wandering charlatan, boasting to win favor? Hera knew Greek social honor demanded proof of claims. Semele listened, eyes narrowing, with mixture of pride and insecurity. That night, when Zeus arrived, Semele rested back against silk cushions, braziers hissing cinnamon smoke, and addressed him plainly. She spoke that if he truly were king of heavens, he must show himself as gods see him. Zeus felt chill of dread, for he remembered how the unshielded sight of divinity scorched mortal senses. he pleaded, offering any other gift. Semele shook her head. She needed certainty to still whispering doubt. Zeus, bound by Styx's oath to grant her request if asked, swore compliance. Greek authors describe Zeus preparing by calling lesser winds to bank around Thebes, subduing thunder to faint glow, and dressing himself in the lightest fragment of glory he could manage. Even so, at the moment he revealed true form, lightning flared within the bedchamber. Glaze on pottery bubbled, bronze lampstands bent like wax, and flameless heat roared. Semele saw a crown of electric white framing features, too bright to comprehend. Awe changed to terror in the heartbeat before mortal flesh yielded. She collapsed, hair sparking, silk igniting. Yet within the inferno, the unborn child shone, unharmed, cradled by divine fire. In grief, Zeus swept the tiny fetus from the flames, slit open his own thigh, and stitched the babe inside with threads of golden light, a second womb safe from Hera's wrath. He stepped into cloud and vanished. But Thebes awoke to smoke and ruin. Cadmus found his daughter's ash mingled with molten bronze. The king, who had once defeated a dragon, now bowed under divine consequence. Priests declared Semele consumed by her own hubris, though whispering servants suspected Hera's involvement. Months later, on Mount Nysa, a hidden valley whose exact location ancient geographers debated, Zeus unstitched the wound and drew forth a healthy boy swaddled in violet aura. He named him Dionysus, meaning twice born, once from Semele and once from Zeus. Nymphs of Nysa nursed the child on honey and wild grape must. Hermes delivered him to foster mothers disguised as a kid to avoid Hera's gaze. Some sources say Rhea, or even the mortal king Athamas, sheltered him, each version underscoring that Dionysus blended wild nature with royal lineage. Hera eventually noticed ivy creeping across Olympus' pillars, a sign of Dionysian presence. She struck him with madness that drove him wandering through Phrygia and Lydia, where he learned fermentation secrets and ecstatic rites from Mother Cybele's followers. When sanity returned, Dionysus carried gifts of wine and theatre to Greece. Yet grief for Semele lingered in every celebratory roar. He descended into Hades to retrieve her shade, arguing that no mortal deserved eternity in darkness for loving honestly. Hades accepted, impressed by persuasive wine, granting Semele rebirth in Olympus as Thyone, meaning raging mother, a nod to thunder's earlier fury. Semele's story underlines Greek fascination with limits between divine and mortal. Requesting proof of godhood reflects human desire for certainty, but warns that absolute truth can burn more fiercely than lies. Hera's manipulation reveals jealousy as strategic force, and Dionysus's subsequent rise portrays trauma forged into cultural thrives. Wine eases sorrow, but also recalls flames that brewed it. This affair showcases how divine contact can both destroy and elevate, birthing a deity who embodies contradiction, joy threaded with loss, frenzy capable of healing. Dionysus later spread wine across Mediterranean, echoing Semele's origin in fertile Theban earth, the same earth her ash nurtured after storm. This scandal fuses desire, doubt, and death to illustrate cost of seeing gods as they truly are, and it ushers wine and theatre into Greek society, influencing everything from symposium debates to tragedy masks. While Dionysus learned to tame grief with grape and song, elsewhere in Tiryns, the mortal Alcmene prayed for her husband's safe return, unaware that Zeus in disguise was about to share her bed and spark the birth of Heracles, a hero whose labors would shake both heaven and earth. Our narrative now shifts from lightning-lit chambers to a quiet marital home awaiting victorious warriors. We travel next to Tiryns, a citadel of cyclopean stone in the Argolid plain, where Queen Alcmene awaited her husband Amphitryon's return from war, and where Zeus shaped one final disguise that would bring the mighty Heracles-born Alcides into the world, and set in motion 12 trials that even gods would watch, with unblinking eyes. Tiryns rose on a limestone ridge north of the harbor of Nauplion. Its walls, built from boulders so large, later Greeks claimed giants had set them, encircled terraced courtyards, and a modest megaron throne room. Alcmene belonged to the Perseid line, tracing ancestry to Perseus, and through him back to Danaë and the Golden Reign. She was known across Argos for unshakable virtue. Amphitryon, her husband, commanded Theban forces in a campaign against the Taphians and Teleboans, rival seafarers who raided cattle along the Gulf of Patras. His absence left Alcmene in quiet vigil, praying nightly to Hera for his safe homecoming. Zeus watched from mountain spire, noting lineage that now looped twice through his own earlier affairs, Perseus and Danaë forming an echo chamber of fate. He also saw a chance to father a champion who could clear the earth of monsters that threatened both mortals and sanctuaries. Classical writers like Hesiod proposed that Gaia petitioned Zeus for such a hero because serpents and lions multiplied in the Age of Bronze. Whatever motive, desire intertwined with divine mandate. One clear evening, Hera attended a wedding feast on Mount Helicon. Zeus seized the window of freedom. He instructed Helios to slow his chariot and prolong darkness. Greek myth allows gods to tug cosmic strings when needed. Zeus then clothed himself in Amphitryon's likeness, down to the faint scar on his right cheek earned in early skirmishes. He approached Tiryns' gates carrying spoils, as proof of victory gleaming shields, and a silver cup wrested from Taphian king Terelos. Palace guards recognized their lord's face and opened the gates without question. Alcmene received the familiar figure with relief. Zeus in guise recounted a triumphant tale, describing how Taphians surrendered, peace restored cattle herds, and Amphitryon could finally lay weapons aside. To make night stretch double the ordinary span, Zeus stilled the moon and thickened clouds over Argos, elongating hours of intimacy. Greek astronomer Eratosthenes later calculated that Zeus made that night 3 times its normal length, a cosmic signature to mark Heracles' conception. At dawn, the real Amphitryon rode up palace rampart, weary yet alive, arriving with identical spoils. Confusion rippled through courtyard. Alcmene, puzzled by repeated story, suspected divine hand. She summoned seer Tiresias, whose blinded gaze pierced deception. He declared that Zeus had visited, and that a child of thunder now grew in Alcmene's womb. Amphitryon accepted fate with mixture of pride and humility. Greek heroes often straddled mortal and divine. Sharing a household with such legacy required resilience. Hera returned, sensed manipulation of lunar cycle, and plotted retaliation before birth. She persuaded Zeus to swear an oath that the next descendant of Perseus born would rule Mycenae. Zeus intended this for his unborn son, but Hera hurried to Argos and delayed Alcmene's labor while inducing premature birth of Eurystheus, cousin of Heracles. By clever manipulation of midwives, she ensured that oath favored her pawn, forcing Heracles to serve Eurystheus later through the infamous labors. When labor finally came, Alcmene cried out beneath cyclopean beams. Hera sent 2 snakes to kill the twins Heracles and his mortal brother Iphicles in their cradle, perhaps to erase rival lineage early. Dawn light slanted through lattice squares as serpents coiled. Infant Heracles, barely days old, reached stubby hands, gripped each snake behind head, and squeezed until life left scaled bodies. The nurse screamed. Amphitryon rushed in, but the hero already held limp serpents aloft like toys. Seer Tiresias confirmed destiny. Alcides, soon renamed Heracles, meaning glory of Hera, in ironic appeasement, would bear strength unmatched, yet that strength would be taxed by Hera's ongoing trials. During childhood, Heracles trained under Linus of Thebes in music. But when Linus struck him for misplayed chord, the youth retaliated with lyre, killing teacher. This episode illustrates temper growing faster than wisdom, foreshadowing future need for purifying labors. Alcmene guided him toward cattle, herding in high pastures, hoping solitude would temper impulses. There he fought the lion of Mount Cithaeron, wearing its shaggy hide thereafter as first trophy. Years later, Hera clouded his mind with sudden madness, causing him to slay his own children by Megara. Facing unbearable guilt, Heracles sought purification at Delphi. The Pythia ordered servitude to King Eurystheus. The very cousin Hera promoted setting stage for 12 labors. Thus, Hera's earlier scheme wrapped back upon itself, binding Heracles to tasks that would rid world of Hydra, Stymphalian birds, Nemean lion, and more, indirectly benefiting gods and mortals, though sprung from spite. Scholars view Heracles as embodiment of the heroic paradox-destructive force harnessed for cosmic balance. His mixed bloodline explains extraordinary might alongside human rage. Zeus achieved a champion, but paid in domestic turmoil. Hera, despite anger, ultimately allowed Heracles' apotheosis after death, marrying him to Hebe, goddess of youth, signaling grudging respect earned through suffering. Alcmene lived to see her son's triumphs and tragedies. Late myths place her death in Megara, honored by local cults who claimed her tomb bore lilies blooming each solstice. Amphitryon fell in battle against minions, yet his foster role mattered. Heracles always called himself son of Amphitryon when humility suited. This affair reveals divine planning layered with desire, how cosmic oaths can be twisted by technicalities, and how a mortal household can become crucible for godlike feats and sorrows. Heracles' labors echo across Mediterranean art and literature, influencing columns at Temple of Zeus in Olympia and friezes of Roman baths centuries later. While Heracles wrestled lions and Hydra on the Greek mainland, on windswept Mount Ida, a Trojan shepherd named Ganymede tended sheep, unaware that Zeus, struck by the youth's beauty, would soon whisk him to Olympus as immortal cupbearer, sparking whispered scandal among both gods and mortals. Our tale now soars from iron-wielded heroes to the eagle's flight toward divine desire. We now ascend the rocky slopes of Mount Ida in the northwest corner of Asia Minor, a region where Anatolian forests mix with Aegean winds and where myth situates the early herds of King Tros, founder of Troy. Here, a golden-haired shepherd boy named Ganymede minded flocks among crocus and thyme, unaware that his grace would draw Zeus himself in the form of a sweeping eagle. This episode differs from earlier liaisons because it shifts the focus from mortal women to a mortal youth, blending admiration, desire, and politics, and leaving both Olympus and Troy forever altered. Mount Ida, known locally as Kaz-Da, towers above the plains where the Scamander River threads toward the Dardanelles. Its slopes are rich with springs, bee-filled chestnut groves, and high summer pastures. In Bronze Age imagination, these uplands stood as backdoor to the city of Wilusa, later Ilios or Troy, controlling routes between Anatolia and the Aegean. King Tros, whose name gave rise to the word Trojan, commissioned his youngest son Ganymede to oversee royal flocks at altitude, for highland sheep produced fine wool prized by Hittite and Mycenaean merchants alike. Ganymede in myth is the ideal of Kalos Kai Agathos, beautiful and good. Poets describe him with hair like polished amber and movement as fluid as creek water. His duties required agility rather than brute force, guiding sheep across scree and coaxing lambs from ravines. Greek society saw pastoral settings as breeding grounds for uncomplicated virtue, positioning Ganymede as innocence awaiting fate. Zeus first noted the shepherd while surveying Trojan terrain for storm patterns. The soft arc of Ganymede's stride against green slopes stirred admiration. Desire mingled with strategic thinking. For Zeus frequently sought new attendants who could refresh ceremony in Olympus. The divine cupbearer role had belonged to Hebe, daughter of Hera, but myths hint at her needing assistance or reassignment. By elevating a mortal youth, Zeus could also secure a symbolic hostage from Troy, weaving political foresight into personal attraction. Hera's attention at this moment was fixed southward on Argive weddings, giving Zeus opportunity. He transformed into a giant eagle, an etos dios, with wingspan greater than any earthly bird and plumage edged in gold. Eagles already symbolized sky rule, so the disguise served as declaration and camouflage combined. With a cry that rippled through cedar trunks, Zeus swooped down the mountainside. Ganymede had paused at a spring, called clepsydra, meaning water thief, refilling a goatskin bag. The eagle's shadow spread across light-dappled moss. Before shepherd dogs could bark, the bird seized him by the waist, talons gentled by divine intent so no blood spilled. Ganymede cried out more in surprise than pain, clutching the bag even as feet left ground. Sheep scattered, bells clanging, and clouds swallowed boy and eagle within breaths. Trojan versions of the myth claim shepherds witnessed the ascent and rushed to King Tros with torn garment as evidence. Grief shook the palace. Tros feared some Anatolian god had claimed his son. Zeus, mindful of mortal allegiance, soon dispatched Hermes with two magnificent gifts: a pair of divine horses swifter than northern winds, and a golden vine crafted by Hephaestus whose leaves never wilted. Hermes explained that Ganymede now served nectar to immortals and would never age or suffer. Tros accepted the compensation, though heartache lingered. On Olympus, Ganymede arrived wearing shepherd tunic scorched slightly by sun. The hours bathed him in spring of immortality, replacing dust with faint celestial radiance. He received a slender crater and learned to pour ambrosial nectar into cups fashioned of electrum. In this new duty, his beauty shone amid marble halls, yet also bred tension. Hera considered the elevation of a mortal above her own lineage an insult layered atop earlier betrayals. Her hostility, however, turned passive in this case, perhaps due to political calculus, for direct harm to cupbearer could strain relations with Troy, whose favor Olympus still courted. Apollo admired Ganymede's flute skills and taught him to refine melodies for symposium banquets. The Muses added choral motifs, making the boy a conduit of culture as well as service. Greek society later adopted pederastic mentorship, partly modeling itself on this divine precedent, though modern scholarship cautions against mapping myth directly onto daily custom. Still, vase painters of classical Athens depicted Zeus and Ganymede with affectionate restraint, eagle beside them, suggesting acceptance of the story as emblem of idealized mentorship. Yet, not all gods welcomed change. Hebe felt her post usurped and retreated to Hera's side, until she later married Heracles. Ares mocked the pastoral boy, prompting Hermes to intercede with witty rebukes. Through these tensions, Olympus mirrored mortal courts, where new favorites disrupt established ranks. Down on Mount Ida, shepherds built a small Heroon, a hero shrine, at the spring where Ganymede vanished. Pilgrims later poured libations there, seeking blessing for youth in service or safety in mountain travel. The myth thus anchored physical landmarks into collective Greek geography. Meanwhile, Trojan bards wove the loss into epic cycles that painted Troy as beloved of gods, yet doomed to envy of Greece. Scholars see Ganymede's removal as early seed in pattern of divine attention, focusing on Trojan lineage, culminating in Paris and the war. Zeus ensured Ganymede's constellation immortality. Placing the youth among Aquarius stars, he signaled that cupbearer now pours life-giving water across cosmic fields. Mariners, on late winter seas, steered by those stars, indirectly guided by a shepherd once lifted from Ida slopes. This affair differs from previous liaisons in that it lacks violent fallout among mortals. Instead, it stirs undercurrents of divine rank and cultural symbolism. It illustrates Zeus's capacity to blend desire with political positioning, gaining both servant and symbolic tribute. Hera's restrained response shows tactical adaptation, saving her fury for other targets. Ganymede himself represents the paradox of sudden elevation, losing homeland, yet gaining eternity. His story emphasizes that the gods can rewrite a mortal's destiny in one sweep, trading pastoral peace for unending service, and shapes Greek notions of youth, beauty, and cosmic order. This scandal introduces court politics atop Olympus and foreshadows Trojan centrality in wider myths, reminding listeners that divine attentions often foreshadow great wars and shifting loyalties. While Ganymede filled golden cups above the clouds, Hera surveyed the ruinous wake of Zeus's passions and began weaving a tapestry of curses and trials, aimed at lovers and offspring alike, determined to reassert her power. Our narrative now shifts from soaring eagles to the intricate web of Hera's revenge that tightened around Greek heroes and heroines for generations. Our path now curls through the labyrinth of Hera's memory, tracing how the Queen of Olympus answered each of Zeus's affairs with calculated punishment that rippled across Greece like aftershocks of a distant quake. From Argos to Delos, from Lydia to Libya, Hera's reprisals seldom struck Zeus directly. Instead, they tangled the lives of lovers and offspring, bending prophecies, seeding monsters, and shaping the very quests that define Greek heroism. Hera's authority derived from two pillars: marriage and sovereignty. Every betrayal threatened not only her dignity, but the cosmic order she guarded. Early poems portray her anger as stormy, yet beneath the thunder lies strategy. She wielded curses the way generals deploy hoplites, choosing targets and terrain with care. Leto and the island that floated. Leto, daughter of Titans Coeus and Phoebe, conceived twins Apollo and Artemis after a night under star-witnessed silence. Hera's first response was geographic embargo. She ordered Gaia that no solid land should welcome Leto's labor. The pregnant goddess wandered crest-lined Asia Minor to Ionian Isles, turned away by every city, afraid of Hera's wrath. Greek hymns describe her ankles swelling, her voice cracking in exhaustion. Only Delosthon, a drifting slab of pumice dared offer refuge. The moment Leto stepped upon its sands, Delos rooted itself to seabed, earning future wealth as Apollo's sacred precinct. Hera's curse ironically birthed a pan-Hellenic sanctuary and established Delian League centuries later. Io's endless footsteps revisited. We met Io transformed into a heifer, but Hera's torment did not stop at metamorphosis. By appointing Argus Panoptes as Jalor's 100 Eyes, a living surveillance network, Hera pioneered divine counterintelligence. After Hermes slew Argus, Hera memorialized the watchfulness by setting the eyes into her peacock's tail, turning personal loss into permanent emblem of vigilance. The peacock thus became her heraldic bird, appearing on temple pediments from Samos to Paestum. Semele's ash and Dionysus's madness. Hera could not prevent Dionysus's birth from Zeus's thigh, but she attacked his upbringing. When nymphs of Nysa fostered the boy, Hera sent madness that drove him to Phrygian mountains. forcing him to learn rites of ecstasy among followers of Cybele. Scholars argue that Dionysus's later ability to inspire trance and wine-fueled liberation is directly forged by Hera's persecution. Trauma became theology. Heracles and the 12 labors. No revenge looms larger than Hera's campaign against Heracles. She began in infancy with twin serpents, then clouded his mind in adulthood, causing the slaughter of his children a trigger for Eurystheus's labors. Each labor doubled as public spectacle of Heracles' humility and demonstration of Hera's lingering reach. Even tasks that cleansed the world, slaying the Hydra, capturing Cerberus, owe their necessity to Hera's insistence that hero and humankind pay for Zeus's night in Tyrans. Lamia and the Weeping Desert. Lamia, a Libyan queen renowned for wisdom, also bore Zeus children. Hera cursed Lamia with sleeplessness and the devouring hunger for other mothers' infants. Greek moms invoked Lamia to hush restless toddlers. But underlying myth reveals Hera transforming grief into monstrous cautionary tale. Desert travelers near Cyrene claimed ochre cliffs echoed Lamia's perpetual sobs, a localized example of Hera turning personal vendetta into regional folklore. Echo and Narcissus. When Zeus courted wood nymphs on Mount Helicon, Hera came seeking evidence. Echo, a chatty nymph, stoled Hera with winding stories. Realizing the trick, Hera robbed Echo of independent speech, leaving her only the power to repeat others' words. The fragmentary punishment cascaded. Echo later fell for Narcissus, whose self-obsession turned her curse into eternal, unseen longing, an allegory still whispered in psychology seminars. Strategic geography of curses. Hera's vengeance often aligned with travel corridors. Heracles' labors spanned Mycenae, Elis, Thrace, and Iberia, effectively mapping Greek colonial imagination. Io's path paralleled rumored tin routes from Balkans to Egypt. By tying retribution to landscape, Hera ensured local cults would erect shrines either to placate her wrath or honor victims, embedding her presence in stone and ritual. Political calculus. Importantly, Hera rarely killed lovers outright. Killing would free Zeus to act without remorse. Instead, she imposed lasting trials that nourished myth economies. Bards, potters, temple builders, and festival planners thrived on tales of Hydra heads and golden apples. In a paradoxical way, Hera's jealousy cultivated Greek culture. Philosophical readings. Later, philosophers like Plutarch reinterpreted Hera's actions as cosmic checks and balances, illustrating that unrestrained power, Zeus, needs counterforce, Hera, to generate narrative tension and moral growth. Without Hera, heroes would remain ordinary demigods. Her challenges burnished them into exemplars. This network of revenge shows that love affairs never end at the bedroom window. They echo through cradle, altar, and battlefield, proving that gods wield emotion as policy. Hera's responses shaped trade routes, festival calendars, and even constellations, giving her grudges a strange civic utility. Hera's web of curses demonstrates that divine vengeance can forge heroes, sanctuaries, and cautionary legends alike, leaving no corner of the Greek world untouched. Yet even after Hera's last feather settles, Zeus's thunder still flickers on every horizon. Our final chapter steps back to measure the lightning's long shadow how all 8 affairs together sculpted the mythic age, influenced art, and still crackle in the modern imagination. We now step back from single scandals and trace the panorama they create together, asking how Zeus's 8 most famous affairs reshaped geography, lineage, and cultural memory, from Bronze Age palaces to modern lecture halls, and why millennia later every flash of thunder still seems to echo with names like Danaë, Europa, and Ganymede. Each liaison fixed a new waypoint on the Greek imagination's mental atlas. Danaë's bronze tower locked Argos into the heroic circuit. Europa's ride planted Crete at the crossroads of east and west. Leda's eggs tied Spartan hearths to Trojan horizons. Io's wandering stitched a continental track from the Bosporus to the Nile. Callisto's exile elevated Arcadian pines into northern sky. Semele's ash crowned Theban hills with a vine wreath. Alcmene's trials pinned tyrants to every frontier monster. And Ganymede's ascent placed Mount Ida above even Olympus in certain star charts. Together, these episodes convert scattered city-states into a single, story-charged landscape, where every river, bend, and rocky cape carries whispered precedent. Zeus's children became dynastic seeds. Perseus founded Mycenae. Minoan raised Minos birthed labyrinth politics. Helen's face steered 1,000 oarlocks. Epaphus's line flowed into Libyan queens. Arcas gave Arcadia its very name. Dionysus exported wine and drama. Heracles' descendants, Heracles claimed Dorian thrones, and the lineage of Ganymede boosted Trojan prestige. Genealogists in antiquity treated these trees not as fiction, but as charter myths, legitimizing colonial ventures and alliances. When Syracuse claimed Heraclean ancestry, it invoked Zeus's knight in Tiryns to defend its right to rule Sicily. Potters in Corinth painted golden droplets falling through lattice slats. Sculptors on Naxos carved Europa's bull into temple pediments. Vase painters in Athens captured the moment Pollux hoisted Castor heavenward. And Roman mosaicists set tiny tesserae into peacock eye spirals, honoring Hera's vigilance. Each craft translated thunderbolt gossip into local dialect of clay, stone, or glass. Even architecture bent beneath these myths. The tholos of Delphi, circular like Danaë's tower, echoed her captivity in bronze. Knossos' horn altars nodded to Europa's bull. Theatre masks of Dionysian festivals traced lineage to Semele's burnt chamber. Philosophers mined these tales for moral nuance. Plato cited the Ganymede episode while debating the nature of heavenly versus earthly love. Aristotle referenced Heracles' serpents when discussing inborn virtue contending with external threat. Stoics argued Io's endurance exemplified rational fortitude amid bodily suffering. Thus, Zeus's liaisons formed case studies, shaping Greek and later Roman ethical frameworks. Kings adopted mythic forebears for legitimacy. Alexander the Great boasted descent from Heracles through his mother, Olympias. Ptolemies in Egypt traced right to rule via Epaphus and Libya. Cretan city Cydonia minted coins with Europa on bull to signal shared prestige. Even democratic Athens leveraged Leda's sons when naming twin port fortifications, Castor and Pollux harbor guardians, visible to enemy fleets. These affairs spurred cultic innovation. The Heraion of Samos displayed peacock imagery post-Argus, signaling assimilation of myth into liturgy. Eleuthere introduced first Dionysia festival, honoring Semele's son, which evolved into Athenian drama competitions. Cypriot sanctuaries blended Phoenician Astarte with Greek Aphrodite after Europa's cross-cultural marriage. Argos expanded rites of Hera Acrea, invoking Eo's suffering to heighten petitions for safe childbirth. Ancient farmers read personal meaning into meteorology. Sudden summer storms in Arcadia were said to be Callisto shaking constellation Fur, while unseasonable hail on Delos told of Leto's labor pains. Thus, cosmic spectacle reinforced terrestrial memory, folding ritual calendars around mythic anniversaries. Renaissance painters revived Europa's bull as allegory for European identity. Shakespeare alluded to Danaë's golden reign in The Merchant of Venice as a metaphor for wealth's corrupting seduction. And modern psychologists analyze Echo's curse as early model for communication disorders. Film adaptations recast Heracles' labors as superhero templates, proving these love affairs still anchor narrative DNA. At heart, Zeus's scandals persist because they interrogate power without eliminating wonder. They ask, what happens when limitless authority meets limited consent? How does jealousy shape justice? Can suffering refine greatness? Each answer arrives not as doctrine, but as story, inviting retellings that suit new eras. Lightning, then, becomes not just weather, but a narrative mechanism, exclamation mark in the sky, reminding listeners that actions of those in power reverberate beyond their sight. Together, the 8 scandals sketch a panoramic commentary on fate, agency, and consequence, stretching from Bronze Age barley fields to modern metaphor, proving that a single god's desires can seed dynasties, map continents, inspire art, and still crackle through our cultural circuits. Thank you for spending part of your day wandering bronze towers, Tyrian beaches, Spartan riverbanks, and starlit constellations with us. But the sun is dipping, and it is time to step back into the real world. If you would like to keep traveling through ancient realms, sailing beside Odysseus, feasting in Valhalla, or chasing fox spirits beneath a Japanese moon, join us here at Drowsy Myths. Subscribe, share a tale with a friend, and let the next adventure find you when the hearthfire flickers once again.